My name is Alina, I'm 27, and that evening I discovered my parents had taken 64,000 rubles from my account without asking. If you've ever faced something like this, comment where you're reading from. The apartment was unusually quiet when I came home. No hum from the fridge, just the faint click of the radiator pipes cooling down. I still had my coat on when I checked my phone, thumb swiping through the banking app out of habit. The number glared back at me. Minus 64,000, timestamp 1947, authorized withdrawal. My hand felt slick against the glass, and I realized I was still holding the house keys, their cold edges biting into my palm. For a second I thought it was fraud. Then I remembered. Years ago, in a haze of trust, I'd signed a paper at the branch so my parents could help with errands. I'd forgotten about it. Clearly they hadn't. The strangest part? There was no message, no call. My mother had texted me earlier, just a photo of soup in a chipped bowl, made this today. Nothing about money. My father had been silent all week. The mismatch made my stomach clench harder than the loss itself. If you take from your daughter, do you also send her casual photos like nothing happened? I walked to the kitchen, shoes still on. The light above the stove flickered once before staying steady, a harsh white rectangle on the countertop. I set down my keys and stared at the small things. Half an orange in plastic wrap, a chipped mug with dried tea at the bottom, an unopened envelope from the bank. All the evidence of ordinary life now tainted. My first instinct was to call immediately, but I didn't. Instead, I sat on the cold chair, pressing my fingertips into the wood grain, feeling each ridge. My breath was shallow. My thoughts circled one fact. They hadn't even asked. I didn't know yet that in 3 days I would find something far more deliberate than a silent withdrawal. Something written on paper, black ink that would leave no room for doubt. The next morning I carried my laptop into the kitchen instead of the living room. I wanted the hard surface of the table, not the softness of the couch. The clock on the oven said 7:18, and the smell of burnt toast lingered from my failed attempt at breakfast. I set my coffee mug, plain white, faint crack near the handle, next to the glowing screen. I dialed my mother first. She picked up on the third ring, her voice as if nothing had happened. "You sound early," she said. "Did you use my account yesterday?" My tone was flat, not accusing, not pleading. Silence stretched longer than the question required. Then, "Well, your father needed to pay the mechanic. You know we can't keep the car standing." The explanation was casual, almost bored, like I had asked about the weather. 64,000 rubles, 3 weeks of careful saving, shrunk to the scale of mechanic. I stared at the yellow sticky note stuck to the fridge. Pay utility by 10th. My handwriting, my responsibility. Their withdrawal meant I couldn't clear it on time. The irony burned. "You could have asked," I said. She sighed. That long exhale meant to scold me for being difficult. "Alina, you always have money. Don't make drama." That sentence sliced deeper than the loss. Always have money. As if my work, the nights I left the office at 2200 hours, the careful budgeting, it all erased into a given fact, a bottomless well they could dip into. When I hung up, I felt the coffee cooling, bitter on my tongue. My father didn't answer his phone at all. Something shifted inside me then. Not a shout, not even anger, more like the firm click of a door closing. I opened the banking app again, scrolled to permissions, and hovered over the option to revoke access. My finger didn't press yet, but the decision had already begun. "I won't do this anymore," I whispered into the kitchen light. The words felt heavier than the mug in my hand. It wasn't the first time. That's the part that stung most. How easily I'd let it become a pattern. At 21, when I landed my first real job, I'd celebrated by buying myself a small silver bracelet. My mother noticed it the same evening. "You should have told us before spending. We need help with the gas bill." The bracelet never left its box after that. At 23, I was already covering half of their mortgage payments. 18,500 rubles every month. I told myself it was temporary, until they stabilize. They never did. At 25, after I got promoted and moved into a one-bedroom apartment of my own, my father asked me to co-sign for his new credit card. I remember the ballpoint pen shaking slightly in my hand at the bank counter. He smiled at the clerk. "She's always been the reliable one." I wanted to believe it was a compliment. But there were good moments too, or at least the illusions of them. Family dinners where my mother cooked her heavy borscht and told me how proud she was of my career. My father bragged to relatives that his daughter worked in finance with foreigners. I swallowed their pride like warmth, as if it could cancel out the quiet expectation that my wallet was also theirs. By the time I turned 27, the arithmetic was undeniable. I had funneled over 1.2 million rubles into their expenses. Not gifts. Not shared projects. Just keeping their lives afloat while they slipped deeper into habits they refused to change. What was at stake now wasn't only money. It was my boundary, the invisible line between being a daughter and being a provider. When I saw that withdrawal on my screen, the realization crystallized. They weren't borrowing, they were entitled. I looked around my apartment that evening. The IKEA shelves I assembled alone, the potted fern I'd kept alive for 14 months, the neat stack of folders with my tax receipts. This was my work, my independence. And yet, with a single silent transaction, it could be siphoned away. I traced my finger along the chipped edge of the table and asked myself, what happens if I keep letting this continue? The answer came quickly, cold as the glass of water I held. Everything I've built will no longer be mine. That night, lying awake at 2:11, I finally admitted it to myself. The next step had to be proof, not feelings. I needed to see on paper what they had done. The proof came 2 nights later, not by accident but because I went looking. I stopped at the branch office on Prospect Mira. A squat glass building with fluorescent lights that made the tiled floor look even dirtier. My hands were damp inside my gloves as I waited for my number to flash. A 113. When I sat across from the young clerk, I kept my voice calm. I need a detailed statement of all third-party authorizations linked to my account. She typed, nails clacking on the keyboard. The printer hummed, warm paper sliding into the tray. I took the sheets, 3 pages stapled together, edges still hot. And there it was, my parents' names printed under beneficiaries. Authorization granted March 2018, still active. The latest withdrawal highlighted in bold. 1947, 64,000 rub. ATM withdrawal Central Branch. I held the paper close, the smell of ink sharp, familiar, almost comforting. The lines of text were bureaucratic, but I read them like betrayal written in a different alphabet. What gutted me wasn't just the transaction. It was a note in the remarks column. Authorization renewed by proxy, October 2021. I hadn't signed anything that year. My chest tightened. Someone had submitted something on my behalf. I walked out into the cold air. The statement folded neatly in my bag, edges poking through the fabric like a splinter. I stopped under the yellow street lamp, pulled out the first page, and traced one sentence with my finger. Authorization remains valid until revoked in writing. In that moment, the vague ache inside me hardened into clarity. No more calls. No more sighs disguised as conversations. I had the paper. I had the dates. I whispered it out loud, the words visible in the frosty air. I make a choice. Proof in hand is one thing. Believing myself enough to act on it, that was harder. The following afternoon, I booked an appointment with a lawyer whose office sat above a pharmacy on Tverskaya Street. The stairwell smelled faintly of iodine and old dust. When I stepped inside her cramped office, the clock on the wall read 1642. A stack of crimson folders teetered on the corner of her desk, next to a chipped glass of water and a ballpoint pen with teeth marks on the cap. I slid the stapled bank statement across. She read in silence, eyes flicking line by line. Finally, she tapped the October 2021 entry. You didn't sign this renewal? No. Then it's invalid. They either forged your signature or the branch acted negligently. The words landed like cold water. Invalid. Forged. Negligent. This wasn't family misunderstanding. It was misconduct, clear and simple. She explained the next steps as if reading from a recipe. File a written revocation, demand a review of the 2021 proxy, request reimbursement for unauthorized withdrawals. She underlined a date on her notepad. 10 business days for the bank to respond formally. After that, she said, if they don't reverse it, you escalate to the regulator. I nodded, staring at her notepad. 10 days. A real deadline. Walking back outside, the November air stung my cheeks. I stopped at a kiosk for a bottle of water, twisted the cap, and felt the plastic crackle under my grip. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Don't forget your cousin's birthday Sunday. No mention of the money. No mention of what they had done. Just an expectation, as if my role in the family hadn't changed. I stood there on the sidewalk, traffic roaring by, bottle cold in my hand. This time the ache didn't twist into guilt. It straightened into steel. By the time I reached my apartment, I had already drafted the letter in my head. Tomorrow I would file it. Tomorrow the permissions would be gone. The next morning I arrived at the bank before it even opened. The glass doors reflected my breath in pale clouds as I waited with two other customers, both older men in heavy coats. At 9:01 the lock clicked and we filed in. Inside, the air smelled of toner and faint lemon detergent. I carried a folder with three things: the statement, my passport, and the typed letter I'd printed at home, revocation of proxy authorization. I'd read it aloud twice the night before, the words sharp and steady. At the counter, the clerk glanced at the document. You want to revoke? Effective immediately. She disappeared into the back, leaving me with the sound of printers whirring somewhere beyond the partition. I ran my thumb over the folder's edge, the paper smooth but rigid. 10 minutes later she returned with a form, placing it on the desk. Sign here to confirm. The ballpoint pen felt too light in my hand, but when I pressed it to the line, the letters of my name carved certainty into the page. She stamped it, red ink, today's date, November 14th, 9:17. Your parents will no longer have access, she said. Any further transactions by them will be blocked. I thanked her and gathered my papers. Walking out, I felt taller, though the folder hadn't grown heavier. By noon I'd emailed a scanned copy to the lawyer, subject line, revocation filed. Her reply came within the hour. Good. Keep this. They'll receive notice within 3 days. 3 days. I pictured the moment my parents would try their old habit, insert a card, request money, and be met with a silent refusal. That evening my phone rang. My father. I let it buzz twice before answering. His voice was sharp, unpolished. Why did the bank call us? Because the authorization is gone, I said simply. Silence. I could hear a television in the background, some game show audience laughing. Then a low exhale. You think you're better than us now? I didn't respond to the provocation. Instead, I set my phone face down on the table, the vibration humming against the wood as he spoke. For once, I didn't feel the need to justify. On the screen, the call timer ticked past 1:32. I pressed end. The quiet that followed was not empty. It was deliberate. A shock on their side, yes. But for me, a beginning. The first ripple showed up 3 days later, just as the lawyer predicted. A Sunday morning, 10:14. My phone lit up with a string of messages from my mother. The bank is refusing us. Your father is furious. Do you want us to starve? I stared at the words while the kettle boiled, steam clouding the kitchen window. I'd already planned my groceries for the week, neatly listed in blue ink on a folded notepad. Rice, chicken, oranges, detergent. Ordinary things. Mine to choose, mine to buy. Instead of replying, I opened my banking app. Balance intact. No mysterious withdrawals. For the first time in years, the number on the screen belonged only to me. By Monday, the consequences grew louder. My father left a voicemail. You've humiliated us. Do you understand? We can't even service the loan without your help. I replayed it once, noting the phrasing. Not we can't survive. Not we'll lose the house. Just we can't service the loan. A choice they made, a responsibility they carried. That evening, I sat across from my best friend in a cafe on Sadovaya. Wooden tables, espresso machine hissing behind us, the smell of cinnamon and burnt milk in the air. I slid my phone across the table. They're making it my fault. She read the messages, lips pressing into a line. Alina, it's not your job. I nodded, but the words still felt foreign, like trying on a coat that wasn't broken in yet. By Wednesday, I made another move. I logged into the mortgage portal and confirmed that the one-bedroom apartment 34.6 square meters, *** was solely under my name, no co-signers, no hidden addenda. That small fact steadied me more than any pep talk could. When my mother called that night, I answered. We raised you. You owe us. I've already given more than 1,000,000 rubles, I said evenly. That was my choice. Now I'm making another one. The silence that followed was brittle, like thin ice cracking underfoot. But I didn't rush to fill it. For the first time I felt the faint outline of a win. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. The money stayed where it belonged. The apartment was safe. And my words had been said, no apology attached. It wasn't the end, but it was enough to mark a line I would not cross again. The missing angle revealed itself almost by accident. On a Thursday evening, I came home to find a thick white envelope tucked under my apartment door. No return address, just my name scrawled in uneven letters. Inside, a printed chat log. Someone had slipped it there anonymously, maybe a relative who disagreed with what my parents had done. The messages were between my mother and a distant uncle. Dates stamped clearly. October 2021. She won't notice if we renew it. She never checks. Better do it while she's busy with her promotion. I read those lines 3 times, the letters swimming. The October renewal, the one the lawyer flagged, wasn't a clerical error. It was intentional. They had planned it, counting on my distraction, counting on my blind loyalty. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was a strange, hollow quiet, like walking into a room where someone has just left, the air still unsettled. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with my father's number. I answered, voice steady. "We heard you went to a lawyer," he said, accusation thick. "Yes. Family doesn't drag family to outsiders." I looked at the printout on my table, the black ink stark against the pale wood. "Family also doesn't forge signatures," I replied. There was a pause long enough that I heard him draw in a sharp breath. Then the line went dead. I sat there with the paper, the hum of the fridge behind me, the street lamp's glow seeping through the curtains. For the first time I saw the full picture. Not just need, not just carelessness, but calculated entitlement. And with that clarity, something inside me unclenched. There was no way back to the old arrangement. Even if I wanted to, the trust was broken in print, time-stamped. I gathered the pages, slid them into the same folder with my bank statement and revocation letter. My small arsenal of truth. From here on, it was no longer about convincing them. It was about holding my line, calmly, firmly, without retreat. Winter settled in slowly, the kind that darkens the sky before 1700 hours and leaves frost patterns on the inside of old windows. I moved through my days differently now. Not lighter exactly, but steadier. On a Tuesday morning, I sat at my kitchen table. The same one where I once stared at a cooling mug of coffee and felt powerless. Now there was a fresh notebook open in front of me. A page titled in neat blue ink. Next 6 months. Under it. 1. Finish savings goal by April. 2. Renew my language course. 3. Plan a solo trip. The kettle whistled and I poured tea into a cup I'd bought in Prague years ago. Tiny cracks along its rim catching the light. The air smelled faintly of lemon from the slice I dropped in. My parents still called sometimes. The tone had changed. Less command, more reproach. I answered rarely, and only when I felt calm enough. When I did, my sentences were short, factual. No, I won't transfer money. Yes, I'm well. No explanations, no defense. I'd also placed the folder, the one with the bank statement, the chat log, the revocation letter, into a fireproof box under my bed. Not because I planned to use it again, but because it reminded me I had proof and I had acted. What surprised me most was the silence. Once the endless withdrawals stopped, once the constant requests ended, my apartment itself seemed to exhale. I noticed the small things again. The hum of the radiator at night, the soft texture of my wool blanket, the clean smell of laundry folded in stacks. I don't dramatize this anymore. I don't play the victim. I simply know. I am not a provider for anyone but myself. This evening I light a candle, set my phone face down, and write another line in my notebook. Protect boundaries daily. The wax pools slowly, steady and calm. I sit here, present, breathing. What's mine is mine. And that is enough.